Let us continue with our analysis of Thomas Gray's Elegy written in a country churchyard. We'll be reading stanzas 24 to 29. Uh, Up until now, you have seen that it is Gray who is talking about the ordinary village people who lie buried in the country churchyard. And in these lines, you'll see that it is a village rustic who is describing the habits of the poet himself. The poet writes, "For thee, who mindful of the honoured dead, dost in these lines their artless tale relate, if chance, by lonely contemplation led, some kindred spirit shall enquire thy fate, haply some hoary-headed swain may say, oft have we seen him at the peep of dawn, brushing with hasty steps the dews away, to meet the sun upon the upland lawn." For thee, it is the village rustic uh, talking about the poet, describing the poet. For thee, that is as regards thyself, the poet, that is, the poet is referring to himself here. Mindful of the unhonored dead, the poet, as we have noticed, is anxious to show some marks of recognition to the poor lying buried in this country churchyard, caring to show some consideration for the rude forefathers of the hamlet who are buried in the country churchyard. Dust in these lines, dust does, that is, relates in a way, it is connected with the word relate. The artless tale. Artless tale, the story of their simple life. Relate again means tell. By chance. Chance, by chance, if chance, by chance. By lonely contemplation led. That is, brought hither, somebody brought hither by a desire to indulge in solitary meditation. Kindred spirit, a kind friend, inquire thy fate, ask what has become of thee. The poet is talking about himself in these lines. So we notice that the poet himself occupies the central figure and keeps it until the end of the poem. And in his anxiety to show some mark of recognition to the poor lying buried in the country churchyard, he has celebrated, he has remembered, he has paid a tribute to these humble people in this village. And if some kind friend who happens to visit this place should spend a little time in quiet thought and should ask himself what shall become of him, haply some hoary-headed swain may say. Haply, perhaps, hoary-headed, aged, swain, another word for peasant. That is, the kind inquirer is supposed to ask some old peasant about the fate of Gray, and stanzas 25 to 29 are supposed to contain the peasant's reply. That is how he is going to describe Thomas Gray. At the peep of dawn means in the early morning, brushing with hasty steps the dews away, sweeping the dewdrops from the grass on which they had gathered, to meet the sun upon the upland lawn, in order to reach the high lawn just at sunrise. Such beautiful lines. You know? And the lines telling us that perhaps some old peasant may reply in answer to the inquiry that we have often seen him, that is the poet, in the early morning, sweeping away the dewdrops from the grass as he walked swiftly to reach the high lawn before sunrise. It is the peasant who is continuing the description of the poet in these lines, and you will notice the inverted commas used. He says, "There at the foot of yonder nodding beech that wreathes its old fantastic roots so high, his listless length at noontide would he stretch and pour upon the brook that babbles by." Also notice the use of alliteration throughout the poem, and in this stanza itself, you see listless length and then brook that babbles, So make a note of these repetition of consonant sounds. So there, on that upland lawn, connected to the earlier stanza where the peasant has begun to describe the poet as he is moving towards the high lawn. And here he says, there, on that upland lawn, at the foot of, that is under, nodding beach. Nodding is usually associated with human beings, as they nod their heads. But here nodding means waving in the wind. The beech tree is waving in the wind. Beech is a kind of a forest tree with smooth bark and glossy leaves that wreathes its old fantastic roots so high. Wreathes is twines, fantastic, forming strange shapes, making themselves into curious figures, so high, much above the surface of the ground. His listless length at noontide would he stretch. Listless strength. The word would indicates a habitual course of action. That is, the poet was in the habit of lying stretched at full length in an idle manner at noontide, and pour upon the brook that babbles by. Pour upon, gaze upon. Brook is a rivulet, babbles, flows with a pleasant murmuring sound. By, that is close to the above tree. So, the peasant says that at noon he was in the habit of lying idly down at full length under that beech tree which you see is waving in the wind and which has its roots strangely twisted together above the surface of the ground. In this attitude, he was in the habit of gazing on the rivulet which flows near at hand. Next he says, hard by yon wood, now smiling as in scorn, muttering his wayward fancies, he would rove, now drooping woeful wan. Again, alliteration, like one forlorn, or crazed with care, or crossed in hopeless love. Hard by, that is close to, yon wood, yonder bushes, now smiling as in scorn. Now, sometimes smiling as in scorn, as if inwardly felt disgust at something. His smile did not indicate pleasure but contempt, muttering his wayward fancies, speaking indistinctly. Wayward fancies, random thoughts, would rove, would roam about hither and thither. Now, drooping woeful wan, sometimes again, drooping, dejected, woeful wan, sad and pale, like one forlorn, like a man in a pitiful condition, or crazed with care, like one who is rendered desperate by anxieties, crossed, frustrated, disappointed, hopeless love, crossed in hopeless love, disappointed in love which has no chance of leading to a union with the beloved. The peasant continues, he was in the habit of wandering about in the neighborhood of yonder bushes. He would sometimes speak out his random thoughts indistinctly, sometimes smile a contemptuous smile, sometimes look dejected, sad and pale like a man in a pitiful condition, or like one made desperate by anxieties, or like a lover who has no hope of being united with his beloved. It is the peasant continuing to describe the habits of the poet himself. One morn I missed him on the customed hill, along the heath and near his favourite tree. Another came, nor yet beside the rill, nor up the lawn, nor at the wood was he. The next with dirges due in sad array, slow through the churchway path we saw him borne. Approach and read, for thou canst read the lay, graved on the stone beneath yon aged thorn. One morning, I missed him, did not find him. On the customed hill, the hill where I always used to see him, along the heath, in the wood. Heath is a piece of ground covered with coarse grass. His favorite tree, it has already been mentioned, the beech tree under which he was fond of lying. Another came, that is, the next morning, nor yet beside the rill, not even beside the rill on the bank of the rivulet. Rill is another word for rivulet. So, what the poet is saying, or the rustic, in the words of the rustic, one morning I did not find him on the hill where I always used to see him. He was not there, nor was he in the woods, nor under his favorite beech tree. The next morning too, I did not find him there, nor on the banks of the brook, nor on the lawn, nor in the wood. And the next, with dirges due in sad air, the next day, the next refers to the next day, with dirges due, accompanied by people singing funeral songs in the customary style. A dirge is a song of mourning in sad array, in a mournful procession, slowly. Slow is slowly, the churchway path, the path leading from the main road to the church. We saw him borne away, him, his dead body, borne, carried. Approach and read. Approach. So it is an invitation to other people who are passing by. Approach and read. Come nearer and see his grave. This is addressed by the old peasant to the kind friends who make inquiries about grave. For thou canst read. For thou canst read. I believe you are a literate man. Lay is a song or a ballad, and graved on the stone beneath, graved is carved. Stone refers to the tombstone, and your aged thorn here is the hawthorn tree. So the rustic continues that next morning that I did not find him, and the next morning I saw his dead body carried slowly along the path leading to the churchyard, followed by the people singing funeral songs in the customary style. Come nearer and see his grave for yourself, and read the inscription on the tombstone, for I believe you are a literate man. The next three stanzas that we are going to do are the epitaph on the Grace tomb, and the inscription first enumerates the qualities of his character and then concludes to say that all his merits as well as demerits rest in the hands of God. Further, the epitaph represents Gray as a young man, poor and obscure, though somewhat educated, of a melancholy disposition, sympathetic and sincere. So, the poet has not only reflected about the ordinary country people who live uneventful, obscure lives, but he is also, uh, uh, in the last stanzas, talked about himself, his habits, and he has kind of foreseen his death and has also written an epitaph for his uh, for his tomb. So that's it, and we'll continue in the next lecture. Thank you.